I finish. I knew Nani personally when I was your age. When I say personally, I must confess, he wasn't a good friend of mine. But I had the occasion as a young undergraduate to meet him in his house. We were requesting for a donation to an organization which was quasi-political. And I met him at that time, and I remember the man. We often look at a person's achievements and we tend to forget the man himself or herself. He was gentle, he was polite. We were all undergraduates. He didn't have to meet us. He didn't have to contribute to what we were doing, but he did. And there lies, to my mind, the mark of an honest and decent man. He had no pride. He had no illusions that he was the great Nani Palkhivala and we were just undergraduate students. So with that start, let me tell you what I personally believe. All of us come into this world as sparks of light in a dark universe. We are all sparks of light. But out of all these sparks of life, one spark develops into a flame. And that flame is what draws people and cultures to a particular standard. And that flame, in the present case, was Nani Palkhivala. He was the flame to which all you youngsters here today who are intending to practice law must aspire to. Not all of us can be Palkhivala, not even most of us can be Palkhivala, but we aspire to the standards that he stood for. Humility, honesty, and most of all, a love of freedom. In the course of my time in my professional life, the last 50 odd years, I've heard people talk very flippantly of freedom. No, we need a dictatorship again. No, this kind of thing is slipping out of our hands. What is democracy? Never make a mistake about that. You're only able to say that because you have democracy. Never ever forget, freedom is the most vital of all human rights and of all human emotions. And that is where Mr. Nani Palkhivala comes into play. It is because of him and people like him that today India is still a democracy. When I touch upon some of his legal cases, you'll understand why I say so. In the Bombay bar, it's the practice for us to call everybody by their first name, no matter how senior you are. So I shall refer to him as Nani, not because I have any right by affinity or by standing, but because he was also a member of the Bombay bar. Nani was born to a middle-class family on the 16th of January 1920. He was named Nanaboy, one of those typical Parsi names. He qualified, and as Mrs. Kulkarni mentioned, he applied for a job at the Bombay University. And to the eternal gratitude of the legal fraternity, and indeed the country, he was rejected. He then went and became a professor of law. And I read an article by Soli Solabji who mentioned that his lectures were so interesting that nobody wanted to miss them because they were both a combination of humility and wit. And whereas some professors may have had a problem filling their classes, he had a problem with too many students who wanted to attend his classes. In any case, everybody knows Nani for constitutional law. But as Dr. Kulkarni mentioned, he was not only into constitutional law, he wrote the book on tax law. It was called Cama and Palkhivala. Cama was his senior, and at that time he was a doyen of the Bombay bar. So he wrote this book with Mr. Cama called Income Tax. Cama himself turned around and said that most of the work was done by Nani, not by him. But I don't know how many people know, and I just realized, found it recently, and he was sued for that. I mean, today we are eulogizing his life. But you must also know that he was sued for that book. But he was sued on the grounds of piracy and plagiarism. But when he went into the witness box, and he did, he walked himself into the witness box, his answers were so erudite and his memory was so phenomenal that the judge came to the conclusion that this man could not have copied. This man, it had to be an original piece of work, and therefore the suit was dismissed. Coming now to his just one more anecdote. Again, I read somewhere that Palkhivala's book was so well regarded by the bench that once when he himself was arguing before the Chief Justice of his day, the Chief Justice said, hold on, where's that book? He wanted to make sure that what Palkhivala was arguing was contained in the book. It was the book at the time, and even today, it is well regarded. Now, coming to the constitutional law aspect of the matter, this is where I want all of you prospective lawyers to understand the importance of freedom. The freedom to speak, the freedom to act, the freedom to travel, the freedom to do so many different things, all of which are encapsulated into Part 3 of the Indian Constitution and otherwise referred to as the fundamental rights. In Shankari Prasad's case in 1951, as early as 51, the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that the legislature had the power to amend any part of the Constitution, including, if necessary, the fundamental rights. This thereafter was followed by a famous Golaknath judgment in 1971, I think, I'm not sure. In Golaknath, the Supreme Court came to a complete opposite. They said nothing doing. You can amend by all means, but you will not amend the fundamental rights. The legislature, being difficult, enacted the 24th Amendment, in which they conferred a right upon the legislature to amend any part of the Constitution, including the fundamental rights. The Supreme Court struck it down. Not being satisfied with that, the government again sought to impose itself upon the people. That led to what was popularly known at that time as the Golaknath Review. It started as a review, but as soon as the matter began, Chief Justice secretly told Mr. Palkhivala, why are you arguing the review? This is a fresh challenge to the 24th Amendment, so therefore argue the 24th Amendment itself. Now, if you all ever get an opportunity, you must read this book by Mr. Andhyal Jina, titled, if I'm not wrong, The Case of Nandel Case. You'll be shocked. I was shocked at how the judges behind the scenes sought to maneuver a judgment in their own case, not in their own case, but in favor of their own point of view. Some of the judges were those who had sat on the Golaknath case and were therefore entirely in favor of restricting Parliament's rights. Others had been recently promoted and were therefore inclined towards inclined towards no control and absolute freedom. We often talk about the basic structure of the Constitution. How many of you really know what is the basic structure and how it actually came about? That's the interesting part I found in that book. The basic structure document is a document which says that you will amend the Constitution as you like, but you will not amend it to the extent that you destroy it. The word, as Justice Khanna said in that case, he said the word is amend. It is not obliterate. You cannot obliterate the Constitution in the guise of amendment. Now, when the matter was over and done, there was a clear divide. 13 judges, 6 in favor of control, 6 in favor of no control. Justice H.R. Khanna had delivered a judgment. He was the 13th judge, in which he said, as I said earlier, that this is the power to amend, not the power to obliterate. Therefore, according to him, the basic structure of the Constitution ought not to be altered. Now comes a very interesting thing. The 13 judges sat to deliver judgment. At that time, Chief Justice Sikri, who was one of those who wanted to limit the power of Parliament, distributed amongst his co-judges a document which read view of the majority. And in the view of the majority, he upheld the constitutional amendment subject to one factor, subject to it not destroying, a parliament not having the power to destroy the basic structure. And that is how Nani, by his arguments, and with the help of the Chief Justice, established this doctrine of basic structure. The question then arose whether just because 9 judges would sign that document, just because 9 judges mentioned this is the view of the majority, would that constitute part of the judgment? Would it be binding on the 142? That was the next question. But gradually, over a period of time, the courts have accepted that. And they have accepted that the basic structure includes the protection of the fundamental rights. So, today, thanks to Mr. Palkhivala's arguments, and thanks to the ingenuity of the then Chief Justice, we have a constitution which guarantees our fundamental rights and a legislature who is not entitled to take that away from us. I want you youngsters here to understand the importance of fundamental rights. During the emergency, you were not perhaps there at that time, 1977. During the emergency, fundamental rights were suspended. Now, what is the effect? Since I have lived through that, I can tell you from personal experience that the effect of that was that I was scared to talk to you. I was scared to talk to you because I was scared that somebody would report me, and that would be a problem. So don't ever minimize the importance of your fundamental rights. Don't ever be in a position where you support a legislature or a person who wants to take away your fundamental rights. And if anything, you have to remember anybody for that purpose, you must remember Nani Palkhivala. He argued that and he succeeded in convincing 7 out of 13 judges to take this point of view. I'm told that Justice Cama had, as an aside, mentioned that it took the presiding judges about a week's time to get over the influence of Palkhivala's arguments. And that is, to my mind, the genius of the man. After that, he did argue other cases which he lost, the Privy Purses, bank nationalization, if I'm not wrong. But in the course of the Privy Purses judgment, he made an observation, and I want to quote that to you, which I find very important. That observation was that the survival of our democracy and the unity and integrity of the nation depends upon the realization that constitutional morality is no less essential than constitutional legality. Dharma, righteousness, sense of public duty, lives in the heart of public men. When it dies, no constitution, no law, no amendment can save it. This was in the context of the fact that he felt that the government of India had given a pledge to the princes when they took over the governments, that they would protect their privy purses. So therefore, he evolved the doctrine of constitutional morality. That even though the Constitution may not mention it, but we must interpret the Constitution and the statements made by our leaders on moral grounds, even if they are not strictly legal. Constitutional morality. Having done that, I want to also quote to you what was one of his favorite quotes from an American jurist, I think it was Joseph Story, when he says, "The Constitution has been reared for immortality. If the work of man may aspire to such a title, it may nevertheless perish in an hour by the folly or corruption or negligence of its only keepers, the people." Nations are passed away and left no trace. History gives a naked cause for this. One simple reason in all cases. They fell because their people were not fit. You are the future torchbearers of the law. You are the future torchbearers of freedom and democracy in this country. We have lived our lives. We will pass away shortly. You will live the future. You will bring into existence and continued existence the freedom of man to speak. Even those who decry the Constitution, even those who say there's nothing wrong in taking away fundamental rights, even they don't realize that they have the right to say that because they are free. You can only criticize because you're free. And that, if nothing else, is the legacy of Nani Palkhivala, which I want you to remember. I don't know how many of you know that Nani was offered the post of AG, Attorney General of India. He declined it on the grounds that he did not want to appear for the government against the people. He was also offered judgeship, direct judgeship of the Supreme Court. That also he declined, perhaps for the very same reason, though I don't understand why. He could have done a lot of good on the bench. But he declined it. Nani was, apart from anything else, as you heard earlier, a director of Tata's, and he was an ambassador of India to the USA. Now, Calcutta is not a place where many Zoroastrians are noted. I am one. We have a religious doctrine which says good words and good thoughts, good words and good deeds as a fundamental of our religion. Nani actually lived that. Not many of us can. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Manashni, Gavashni, Gunashni, as they call it in our language, in Persian. He actually lived it. Very difficult to do. He was nice, he was polite, he was gentle, he was brilliant. All combination of what is the best parts of the religion that he followed. As I conclude, and I wish to conclude here, it reminds me, I'm reminded rather, of a statement from Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. How many of you are familiar with that book? You are. You will recall at the very end, when Mark Antony is looking at the body of Marcus Brutus, he says lines which kind of end with the words, "This was a man." This was a man. Nani Palkhivala was a great man. Never forget that. Keep that lamp which I mentioned earlier. Keep that lamp alive. Be free, men and women. Don't let the legislature of any state or any center curb that. That is Nani Palkhivala. Never forget that. Thank you.